The meeting room fell silent as Mitch slapped the folder down on the conference table. His voice carried that manufactured concern managers practice in HR seminars. "You're under internal investigation," he announced, eyes sweeping across my colleagues before settling on me with unconcealed satisfaction. Everyone shifted away from me, a synchronized dance of self-preservation. 11 months of shared lunches, office jokes, and late-night deadlines evaporated in seconds. "For what exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the adrenaline surge. "Unauthorized system access, data transfers during unusual hours, excessive interest in accounts outside your department." He ticked off each accusation with theatrical precision. "Pretty serious stuff, Anna." The team avoided eye contact. Dina, who had borrowed my stapler just this morning with a smile, suddenly found her notepad fascinating. Raj, who had invited me to his daughter's birthday last weekend, examined his watch as if time might stop if he stared hard enough. "We've been monitoring your activities for weeks," Mitch continued, clearly enjoying himself. "The evidence is substantial." My palms dampened, not from fear, from calculation. This was happening 3 weeks ahead of schedule. "I'd like to see this evidence," I said. "That's not how this works. Sign this." He slid a document across the table. "It's a simple admission of improper conduct. We'll make this discreet. You'll be escorted out today with 2 weeks severance." The alternative hung unspoken. "Don't sign, and they'd make an example of me. And if I refuse?" His smile tightened. "Then things get less pleasant, much less." The team watched this exchange like spectators at a car crash, horrified but unable to look away. These people who'd praised my work yesterday now waited to see how thoroughly I'd be destroyed. I reached for my phone. "This isn't a negotiation," Mitch snapped. "You don't get to call anyone." I ignored him, dialing with deliberate calm. "Hello? Is this the FBI?" I maintained unwavering eye contact with Mitch. "Yes, this is Agent Hayes. The bridge is compromised." I repeat, "The bridge is compromised." Mitch lunged across the table, reaching for my phone. "What the hell do you think?" "Code yellow at location Sunflower," I continued, dodging his grasp. "Request immediate backup." Chaos erupted. My supervisor knocked over his chair, scrambling to reach me. 2 senior managers bolted toward the door. The remaining team members froze, confusion replacing their judgment. "She's bluffing," Mitch shouted, his face reddening. "Security!" I stood my ground. "Am I?" The security guard appeared at the doorway, looking uncertain. For one heart-stopping moment, he moved toward me instead of Mitch. Had my message failed? Was my team not in position? Then came the thunder of footsteps in the hallway. "Federal agents, everyone stay where you are." Mitch's face transformed from rage to disbelief as a dozen agents flooded the room. My actual colleagues, not the strangers I'd pretended to work alongside for nearly a year. "This is ridiculous." Mitch backed away. "We were following standard procedure for employee misconduct." "Save it," said Agent Rodriguez, handcuffs already out. "We've heard enough over the wire she's been wearing." My colleagues stared at me, comprehension dawning in their eyes. I wasn't Anna from accounting after all. As Mitch was read his rights, our eyes locked. His held something I'd waited 11 months to see, the realization that he wasn't untouchable after all. The beginning of justice for 843 people who had no idea what had been happening to their money. But this wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning. If this story has grabbed your attention, hit that like button and subscribe to hear what happens next. Drop a comment if you've ever had a workplace moment where everything suddenly changed. Now, let me tell you who I really am and how this all started. My name is Eliza Hayes. And before I walked into that building 11 months ago with a false resume and a wire, I was a forensic accountant turned federal agent specializing in financial crimes. Not the path I expected when I graduated with my accounting degree, but life has a way of reshaping our plans. I grew up watching my grandparents lose their retirement savings to a trusted financial advisor who disappeared overnight. I witnessed my hardworking father struggle to rebuild what had been stolen from them. That sense of helplessness shaped me, carved determination into my bones. When the pattern of complaints about Alpine Financial Services reached our office, something about it triggered that old memory. Hundreds of ordinary people, teachers, nurses, construction workers, reporting mysterious fees and vanishing funds. Small amounts, typically, just enough to fly under the radar for most people. Nobody would steal just $50. my supervisor had said when I first brought the pattern to his attention. They would if they took $50 from thousands of people, I'd countered. 3 weeks of preliminary investigation revealed something bigger than we'd imagined. A sophisticated scheme targeting specific customer demographics, mainly older clients, immigrants with language barriers, and young adults with their first accounts. People less likely to question authority or understand the fine print. The team was skeptical about sending someone undercover. White-collar investigations typically involved warrants, not wires. But traditional approaches had failed with Alpine. They were too careful with their paper trail. We need someone on the inside, I argued. Someone who can track the money as it moves. That someone became me, Anna Wilson, recent transplant with decent credentials and an unassuming manner. Perfect for a mid-level accounting position at Alpine Financial's main branch. Getting hired was the easy part. What followed was months of methodical work, building trust while hunting for evidence. I'd arrive early, make coffee for the team, volunteer for extra assignments. I learned about Dina's struggles with fertility treatments and Raj's pride in his daughter's science fair projects. I became the office friend, too, reliable, sympathetic, unremarkable, all while secretly documenting the elaborate system Mitch had designed. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Small fees automatically generated on certain types of accounts. Administrative charges applied and then reversed, leaving a tiny percentage behind, too small for most customers to notice on monthly statements. Systematic rounding in the bank's favor. Each method yielding modest sums that, when multiplied across thousands of accounts, produced millions. The money flowed through a labyrinth of internal transfers before disappearing into investment accounts registered to shell companies. The average customer losing funds would never connect these tiny deductions to the luxury cars in the executive parking lot or the performance bonuses awarded quarterly. By month 3, I had confirmed the scheme existed. By month 6, I had identified the key players. By month 9, I had mapped the money trail. The operation was scheduled to conclude next month with enough evidence to ensure convictions. Until Mitch moved up the timeline by announcing my investigation. What I didn't know until later was that a routine security scan had flagged my after-hours access. Nothing conclusive, just enough to raise questions. Mitch, always protective of his system, decided to eliminate the risk by making an example of me. He'd done it before. 3 employees in the past 5 years had been publicly accused of misconduct, forced to sign away their right to challenge their termination, and escorted out. The perfect way to remove threats while sending a message to everyone else. Don't ask questions. Except this time, he targeted the wrong person. After the arrests, I sat in a debriefing room surrounded by my actual teammates. The adrenaline crash left me exhausted. You did good work, Hayes, Agent Rodriguez said, sliding a coffee across the table. 8 months of evidence gathered, 17 individuals identified in the scheme, approximately $12 million siphoned from customer accounts. The customers, I said. When do they get their money back? Asset recovery is already working on it. The tricky part will be identifying all the victims. Some probably never noticed. Like Mrs. Loretta Chen, who came in monthly to question her statement, only to be patronizingly told she must be misremembering her balance. Or Daniel Ortiz, who was made to feel financially illiterate when he questioned a series of unusual charges. The elderly couple who couldn't afford medication because their account was mysteriously short every month. The system counted on shame and self-doubt to keep victims quiet. We'll need your testimony, Rodriguez continued. This won't be quick or easy. Financial crimes rarely are. I nodded, already preparing for the long road ahead. The arrests were just the beginning of a case that would take months, possibly years to fully prosecute. What I didn't anticipate was how empty I would feel walking out of Alpine Financial for the last time. For all the wrongs committed there, I had built relationships, artificial ones based on a false identity, but relationships nonetheless. I had watched Dina receive positive pregnancy test results and celebrated with the office. I had helped Raj brainstorm science project ideas. They weren't complicit in the scheme, just oblivious to it. Yet they had turned on me instantly when Mitch pointed his finger. That night, alone in my apartment, I removed the pictures of Anna's family, stock photos of people I'd never met, and packed away her life. I scrubbed off the light makeup I'd worn daily to look less like myself. I called my actual mother for the first time in months without having to use coded language. Is it over? She asked. The undercover part is, Now comes the hard part. Will you be in danger? I thought about Mitch's face as he was led away, the cold calculation in his eyes, even as the handcuffs clicked shut. No, I lied. It's just paperwork from here. But something told me this was far from over. Men like Mitch don't go down easily. And I had just helped take down 17 of them at once. The trial preparations consumed the next 3 months of my life. Endless meetings with prosecutors, reviewing evidence, preparing testimony. The case had expanded beyond Alpine Financial to include 2 partner institutions implicated in the money trail. 23 defendants now, not 17. I was back to being Eliza Hayes, federal agent, but I couldn't shake the ghost of Anna Wilson. Sometimes I'd catch myself responding to that name, or unconsciously applying the subtle makeup techniques I'd used to alter my appearance. Identity is more fragile than most people realize. 6 weeks after the arrests, I was reviewing transcripts when Rodriguez knocked on my office door. Heads up, Mitch hired Griffin Perry. My stomach tightened. Perry was a defense attorney known for 2 things: exorbitant fees and ruthlessly discrediting witnesses. They're claiming entrapment, Rodriguez continued, and they've filed motions to suppress almost everything we gathered, arguing the undercover operation wasn't properly authorized. That's ridiculous. We followed every protocol. Of course we did. But they only need to create doubt. He hesitated. And there's something else. They're digging into your past, your grandparents' situation, suggesting you had a personal vendetta. I set down my pen. That was 20 years ago. That was 20 years ago. Perry doesn't care. He's building a narrative that you manipulated evidence because of personal bias. Later that evening, as I left the federal building, a black sedan pulled alongside me, the window lowered to reveal Raj's familiar face. Agent Hayes, can we talk? Against better judgment, I got in. I didn't know, he said immediately, about any of it. I swear, I believe you. Some of us have been questioned. His hands fidgeted with his keys. They make it sound like we should have known, like we were all part of it. What did you tell them? The truth. That we processed what we were given. That nobody explained the overall system. He swallowed hard. My wife thinks I could be charged. We have a second baby coming in December. This was the collateral damage of financial crimes. Not just the direct victims, but the innocent bystanders caught in the aftermath. People like Raj who processed numbers without understanding their significance. If you cooperated honestly, you should be fine, I assured him. There's something else. His voice dropped. Dina got a call from Mitch last week, from jail. He was asking questions about you, what you accessed, who you talked to. My pulse quickened. What did she say? Nothing helpful, I think. But Hayes, he's not the only one making calls. The week before the arrests, there were these executives visiting from the partner bank. They spent hours in closed meetings with Mitch. One of them, he keeps calling the office, asking about server backups and archive access. I thanked Raj for the information and recommended he speak directly to the prosecution team. As he drove away, I called Rodriguez. We need to check on Alpine's external partners. They're getting nervous. 2 days later, a key witness, Alpine's former IT director, who had agreed to testify about how the fee system was programmed, was found unconscious in his home. Carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty heater. He survived but suffered memory impairment affecting his recall of specific technical details. Just a coincidence, the local police said. The prosecution disagreed and placed 3 other witnesses in protective arrangements. I received additional security protocols, including a temporary relocation to a different apartment. They're desperate, Rodriguez reassured me. This means our case is strong, but doubt had taken root. Our meticulous operation was under siege from multiple directions. Legal challenges, witness intimidation, media leaks questioning the investigation's integrity. The worst blow came during the preliminary hearing. Perry had somehow obtained internal emails between my supervisor and me from before the operation, emails discussing my personal interest in the case. Agent Hayes, Perry addressed me on the stand, would you say your judgment regarding Alpine Financial was impartial and unbiased? Yes. He produced the emails. Then perhaps you can explain why you wrote, and I quote, I've seen this pattern before. It destroyed my family. I won't let it happen to others. The judge allowed the line of questioning despite prosecution objections. You created an elaborate fiction to infiltrate Alpine, Perry continued, lived as Anna Wilson for nearly a year. Isn't it possible that your desire for justice, Or perhaps revenge for your grandparents colored your interpretation of routine financial operations? No. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence you selectively gathered while operating under false pretenses. By the time I left the stand, the damage was done. The defense had painted me as a vigilante with a personal vendetta, not a professional agent following evidence. That night, I couldn't sleep. The case wasn't lost. The financial paper trail remained damning, but my credibility had been undermined. Somehow, Perry had accessed emails that should have been confidential. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Parking level 3, blue sedan, 10 minutes, come alone. Every training protocol warned against such meetings, but something told me this was important. I tucked my service weapon into my jacket and took the elevator down. The parking garage was dimly lit and eerily silent. The blue sedan sat in a corner space, engine off. As I approached, the driver's door opened. Dina stepped out, looking nothing like the friendly coworker I'd known. Her face was drawn, eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. "I shouldn't be here," she said without greeting, "but I can't sleep. I keep seeing Mrs. Reynolds' face." Who? The old woman who came in crying last year because her account was short for the third time. Mitch had me tell her she must be confused. I believed him then. Her voice cracked. She died 2 months later. Her son came in to close her account and mentioned she'd been skipping heart medication because she thought she couldn't afford it. And I remained silent, letting her continue. "After you were arrested, after they tried to fire you, I started looking more closely at the accounts I handled. The patterns you must have seen." She handed me a USB drive. "This was supposed to be destroyed during the system upgrade last week. It's the original programming directive for the fee structure, with Mitch's annotations. And this," she passed over a legal notepad, "is dates and times of calls Mitch made from detention, including 3 to someone named Jerome at Westward Partners." Westward Partners was the investment firm we suspected was laundering the proceeds, but couldn't prove direct connection. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I processed the paperwork when Mrs. Reynolds closed her checking account to pay for her husband's funeral 4 years ago. I helped her set up automatic payments for her bills, including her prescriptions. I was part of the system that killed her." Her voice hardened. "And because yesterday someone left a picture of my house on my car windshield. No message, just the picture." After Dina left, I immediately took the materials to Rodriguez. The USB drive contained exactly what we needed: direct evidence linking Mitch to the deliberate creation of the fraudulent fee system, with notes calculating expected revenue. "This changes everything," Rodriguez said, "and we need to get Dana protection immediately." But when we sent agents to her home, she was gone. Packed bag, cell phone left behind. Her husband said she'd received a phone call and left immediately, telling him to take their daughter to his mother's house upstate. The next morning, Perry withdrew several key motions in the case. By afternoon, 3 defendants had approached the prosecution about potential cooperation deals. "They're turning on each other," Rodriguez said. "Classic response when the evidence becomes overwhelming. We've got them." For the first time in weeks, I felt the case solidifying again. The prosecution's confidence grew with each new cooperation agreement. Even the judge seemed increasingly skeptical of the defense's arguments. Then Dina's car was found at a bus station 50 miles away. No surveillance footage, no bus ticket purchased in her name, no sign of where she had gone. Just her empty vehicle, with a stack of client account statements in the trunk, each annotated with highlighting and sticky notes identifying unusual fee patterns. More evidence for our case, but at what cost? That night, as I reviewed the new materials, my apartment buzzer rang. The security detail checked the visitor, a delivery courier with a certified letter requiring signature. The envelope contained a single sheet of paper with an address in an industrial area outside the city, tomorrow's date, and a time, 9 p.m. No signature, no explanation. Every instinct warned me this was a trap. I called Rodriguez. "Absolutely not," he said after I explained. "We'll send a surveillance team, but you're not going anywhere near that address." I agreed, but something about the precision of the note bothered me. The handwriting was familiar. At 8:30 the next evening, Rodriguez called. "Surveillance reports an abandoned warehouse. No activity, no signs of recent entry." At 8:45, I received a text from an unknown number. "Time running out. Jerome knows about Hayes, not just Anna." My real name hadn't been made public. The connection between Eliza Hayes and Anna Wilson was known only to the investigation team and the defendants, and apparently to whoever sent this message. At 8:55, against direct orders and my better judgment, I left my apartment through the service entrance, avoiding my security detail. I took a taxi to within 3 blocks of the address, then approached on foot, service weapon drawn. The warehouse appeared exactly as described, dark, abandoned, no signs of life. I circled the perimeter once before, approaching a side door left slightly ajar. Inside, emergency lights cast weak illumination across an empty storage floor. A single chair sat in the center, with a manila envelope on it. I swept each corner of the space before approaching the chair. The envelope contained a single USB drive and a handwritten note. The account connections you couldn't find. Run. The last word was barely processed when I heard the mechanical click of a door locking, followed by the unmistakable hiss of gas. I sprinted toward the exit, already feeling lightheaded. The door wouldn't budge. As consciousness began to slip, I heard distant sirens. Then, nothing. I woke in a hospital bed with Rodriguez standing over me, his expression oscillating between relief and fury. You disobeyed direct orders. The evidence would have been worthless if you were dead. He softened slightly, but it turns out to be incredibly valuable. The USB contains the complete roadmap of how Alpine, Westward Partners, and Pinnacle Trust moved the stolen funds. Account numbers, transaction dates, everything we couldn't find. Who left it? We don't know. But they also called 911 reporting a gas leak at the warehouse. That's the only reason you're alive. As I recovered, the case against Mitch and his associates strengthened daily. New witnesses came forward, emboldened by the mounting evidence. Former employees revealed how they'd been compartmentalized, each seeing only pieces of the scheme without understanding the whole. But questions remained. Who had tried to kill me? Who had saved me? And where was Dina? 3 days before the trial was scheduled to begin, Jerome Wilcox, CEO of Westward Partners and the alleged endpoint of the money trail, was found dead in his vacation home. Apparent suicide, complete with typed note confessing to knowledge of the fraudulent scheme. Too neat, too convenient, and entirely too suspicious given the timing. The prosecution team worked overnight reassessing the case strategy. With Wilcox dead, certain evidence chains were compromised. His convenient suicide had effectively cut off the investigation's path to potentially bigger players. I was reviewing the updated brief when my office phone rang. Agent Hayes. The voice was distorted, unrecognizable. The game isn't over. Tomorrow, check the witness list again. Before I could respond, they hung up. The next morning, an amendment to the defense witness list arrived. Denna Miller, former Alpine employee, now prepared to testify that the unusual account activities were routine industry practices, not fraud. The woman who had provided crucial evidence against Mitch was now appearing as a defense witness. The prosecution team scrambled to understand this development. Dina, who had risked everything to provide evidence against Alpine, was now listed as a defense witness. The woman who'd shown me account statements with highlighted fraud patterns was suddenly prepared to testify they were routine industry practices. It doesn't make sense, I told Rodriguez. She was terrified of these people. She received threats. People change sides when they're scared enough, he replied, but I could see doubt in his eyes too, or when they're paid enough. The lead prosecutor, Vivian, was more blunt. If she contradicts her earlier evidence, our case loses significant credibility. The defense will paint all our witnesses as unreliable. We spent hours strategizing how to counter Dina's potential testimony, but without knowing what she planned to say, we were shooting in the dark. That night, my apartment buzzer rang again. The security detail reported another courier delivery. This one contained a hotel keycard with a room number written on the sleeve, 714. I recognized the logo, a mid-range hotel about 15 minutes from my apartment. Against all protocol, but with a heads up to Rodriguez this time, I went. Room 714 was empty when I entered, weapon drawn. The television was on, playing local news coverage of the upcoming trial. On the bed lay a burner phone that began ringing the moment I stepped inside. You came alone? A voice I recognized immediately, despite electronic distortion. Yes. Where are you, Dina? Not important. Listen carefully. I don't have much time. Tomorrow in court, I need you to ask me about Account Review Protocol 16. What's that? Something that doesn't exist. When I hesitate, press me on it. Ask if it was part of the quarterly compliance check. Dina, what's happening? Are you safe? No, none of us are. They have my daughter Eliza. Her voice cracked. The first time I'd heard her use my real name. They've been watching her preschool for weeks. Yesterday, they sent me a picture of her on the playground, with a man standing nearby. Their message was clear. We can protect you both. No, they have people everywhere. The only way through this is to follow their script tomorrow, then destroy them from the inside. The line went silent for several seconds. I need to go. Just remember, Protocol 16. Make it seem like you expected me to know about it. The call ended before I could ask anything else. Back at my apartment, I debated whether to share this development with the prosecution team. If Dena was being coerced, we needed to intervene. But if revealing her contact put her daughter at risk, I decided on a compromise, telling Rodriguez about the meeting, but only that Dina seemed under duress and might not be voluntarily helping the defense. We should postpone, he suggested. No, she was clear that we need to proceed, but carefully. The next morning, the courtroom hummed with tension. Media filled the gallery, drawn by the high-profile financial crimes and the drama of an undercover operation. The defendants sat in a row, Mitch in the center, impeccably dressed despite months in detention, flanked by his co-conspirators. When Dina entered, I barely recognized her. Gone was the warm, slightly frazzled working mother I'd known. This woman moved with rigid precision, her face blank, eyes never settling on any single point in the room. Defense counsel called her to the stand first. Ms. Miller, you worked at Alpine Financial for 7 years, correct? Yes. And during that time, you processed thousands of customer accounts? Yes. In your professional opinion, were the fee structures at Alpine unusual or outside industry standards? Dina hesitated for a microsecond. No, they were consistent with standard practices. For 40 minutes, she systematically undermined our case, describing the fee system as transparent and appropriate, claiming any irregularities were customer misunderstandings or system limitations. With each answer, the prosecution's case seemed to weaken. When cross-examination began, Vivian started with basic foundation questions, establishing Dina's role and responsibilities. Then she nodded subtly to me, my cue. I slid her a note with my question. She read it, frowned slightly, but proceeded. Ms. Miller, I'd like to ask about Account Review Protocol 16. You were responsible for implementing that, correct? Dena's composure cracked. Just as she'd predicted, she hesitated. I'm not familiar with that protocol. Really? It was part of the quarterly compliance check you oversaw. No, She glanced toward the defense table, where Mitch was watching intently. There was no such protocol. Are you certain? Because we have documentation suggesting otherwise. Dina's eyes darted toward the gallery, then back to Vivian. May I see this documentation? As Vivian approached with a manila folder containing blank papers, a bluff, Dana's hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. For the record, Vivian said, this document describes a systematic review process for accounts flagged for unusual fee applications, a process you personally managed. Dina studied the empty folder, then looked up. Something had changed in her expression, a resolve I hadn't seen before. There was no Protocol 16, she said clearly, but there was a different system, one that Mr. Mitchell required certain employees to implement without documentation. The defense lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection. This goes beyond the scope of the question. Your Honor, Vivian countered. The witness is clarifying her answer about account review procedures. The judge allowed Dina to continue. What followed was 2 hours of devastating testimony as Dina methodically exposed the entire fraud scheme, producing handwritten notes she'd kept hidden from both sides. She explained how Mitch had compartmentalized the operation, ensuring no single employee saw the complete picture, how threats and manipulative bonuses kept questions minimal. And why are you sharing this now? Vivian asked. When you previously agreed to testify for the defense, Dina looked directly at Mitch for the first time. Because my daughter deserves to see what honesty looks like, even when it's terrifying. The defense attorney attempted damage control during redirect, suggesting Dina was lying to avoid prosecution herself, but the detailed records she'd secretly maintained proved impossible to discredit. When court adjourned for the day, Dina was immediately taken into protective custody, along with her family. The prosecution team was euphoric. That was masterful, Vivian told me. How did you know to ask about a non-existent protocol? Just intuition, I lied. But our victory was short-lived. That evening, a senior Justice Department official requested an urgent meeting with our team. He arrived with 2 internal affairs officers. "We have a problem," he announced without preamble. "Defense counsel has filed a motion alleging evidence tampering and witness coaching." "That's absurd," Rodriguez protested. "Maybe. But they have hotel security footage showing Agent Hayes meeting with Dina Miller last night, despite Ms. Miller being on the defense witness list." Every eye in the room turned to me. "Agent Hayes," the internal affairs officer said, "did you meet with prosecution witness Dina Miller without disclosure to the court or defense?" The trap was elegant. If I admitted the meeting, I could be removed from the case for witness tampering. If I denied it, the video evidence would discredit me entirely. "Ms. Miller contacted me," I said carefully. "She indicated she was under duress and that her testimony was being coerced through threats to her child. And you didn't report this immediately because she specifically warned that official intervention would endanger her daughter." The senior official sighed. "The defense is moving to have all evidence gathered during your undercover operation thrown out, claiming it's all potentially tainted by your conduct. That's ridiculous. The financial records stand on their own, perhaps, but the judge has ordered a hearing on the matter tomorrow morning. Until then, you are suspended from all case activities." After they left, Rodriguez stayed behind. "This was coordinated," he said quietly. "Someone tipped the defense about your meeting. Someone with access to that hotel's security system. The same someone who left the keycard for me," I realized. This whole thing was a setup. That night, I couldn't sleep. Our seemingly solid case was unraveling. Someone had orchestrated an elaborate trap, using Dena's genuine concern for her daughter to manipulate both of us into a compromising meeting, then using that meeting to challenge the entire investigation. The next morning, I sat in the back of the courtroom as the judge heard arguments about my conduct. The defense painted me as a rogue agent obsessed with taking down Alpine at any cost, willing to manipulate witnesses and manufacture evidence. When the prosecution presented Dina's account of being threatened, the defense countered with phone records showing she had initiated contact with me, not the reverse. The judge appeared troubled. While I'm sympathetic to concerns about witness safety, proper protocols exist for such situations. Agent Hayes deliberately circumvented these protocols. My heart sank as he continued. "However, the extreme remedy of excluding all evidence gathered during the undercover operation seems disproportionate, particularly given the substantial documentary evidence corroborating the alleged scheme." The defense attorney pressed his advantage. "Your Honor, if the investigation was tainted from the beginning by Agent Hayes' personal vendetta, My ruling," the judge interrupted, "is that Agent Hayes will be removed from further participation in this case, and the jury will be instructed to consider her testimony with appropriate caution. However, the financial records and other documentary evidence remain admissible, as do the testimonies of other witnesses. A compromise that damaged my professional reputation but preserved the core of our case." As the hearing concluded, I noticed Mitch watching me with the faintest smile. Not triumph, something more calculating. Outside the courthouse, Rodriguez caught up with me. "It's not ideal, but we still have a strong case. Dina's testimony yesterday was compelling, and the financial records speak for themselves. Something's not right," I told him. "This feels like misdirection. They sacrificed a legal maneuver that was unlikely to succeed anyway, just to get me off the case. Maybe they think without you, we'll miss something. Or maybe they want me isolated from the team." Rodriguez's phone buzzed with a message. He checked it, his expression darkening. "We just got word. The secure facility where we're keeping the evidence servers was breached last night. Nothing appears missing, but the system was offline for 20 minutes. Long enough to plant something or alter records," I said. "That's what this is about. They needed me discredited before whatever they planted is discovered." For the next week, I was sidelined, officially suspended pending review, forbidden from accessing case materials or contacting the prosecution team. I watched news coverage of the trial from my apartment, frustrated by my inability to help. The case proceeded without me, but something felt off in the reports. The prosecution seemed to be struggling with technical evidence that had previously been solid. Witnesses appeared confused by questions about specific transactions that had been clearly documented. On the 8th day of trial, Rodriguez defied orders and came to my apartment. "They altered the server data," he confirmed. "Subtle changes to dates and amounts, just enough to create inconsistencies with witness testimony and make our evidence look unreliable. Can't we prove the tampering? We're trying, but they were clever. The changes match the server backup we kept in a separate facility. Both sets of evidence have been compromised. We were so focused on our conversation that we missed the first subtle signs, the faint odor, the slight pressure change as the ventilation system activated. By the time Rodriguez noticed his breathing becoming labored, the room was already filling with colorless gas. "Out!" he gasped, staggering toward the door. We barely made it to the hallway before collapsing. My last conscious thought was the realization that I'd been right. They had wanted me isolated, not to remove me from the case, but to eliminate me entirely. I jolted back to consciousness with the burn of oxygen flooding my lungs and the wail of emergency sirens in my ears. Paramedics hovered over me, their voices echoing as if from the bottom of a well. Rodriguez lay on a stretcher beside me, an oxygen mask obscuring most of his face. "Agent down! We need immediate transport!" someone shouted. My vision swam as they loaded us into separate ambulances. The last thing I remembered was a paramedic saying, "Stay with us, Agent. You're going to be okay." I woke again in a hospital room with armed guards outside my door. Rodriguez sat in a chair by the window, his face ashen but alert. "How long?" I croaked. 18 hours. The building security guard found us in the hallway. Another few minutes and he didn't finish the sentence. "What was it?" "Hydrogen cyanide, professional grade, released through your ventilation system." He leaned forward. "Hayes, this goes higher than Mitch. Way higher." A doctor interrupted us, checking my vitals and explaining we'd both been incredibly lucky. The gas concentration had been slightly miscalculated, and our quick exit to the hallway had saved our lives. When she left, Rodriguez continued in a low voice. "The attempt on your life triggered protocols even I can't override. You're being moved to a secure location this afternoon. New identity, complete isolation until the trial concludes." "They're winning," I whispered. "First they discredit me, then they corrupt the evidence. Now they'll make me disappear while the case falls apart. Not if we change the game." Rodriguez handed me his personal phone. "You have 15 minutes before the protective detail arrives to transfer you. Make them count." I called the one person who might still help Vivian, the lead prosecutor. "I can't be talking to you," she answered. "Your involvement compromises the case. Listen first, then decide," I said, explaining what had happened and our suspicions about higher-level involvement. "Even if you're right," she replied, "the evidence has been corrupted. The defense is systematically dismantling our timeline of transactions. What if there's another source of records? One they couldn't access? Like what? They breached both our secure facilities, like the regulatory backups. During my undercover work, I'd discovered that Alpine's system automatically transmitted daily transaction data to the Federal Reserve for routine regulatory compliance. These backups weren't part of our case because they contained only summaries, not the detailed records needed to prove fraud. But they might show inconsistencies with the altered evidence. Those records are administratively sealed, Vivian pointed out. We'd need special authorization from the Federal Reserve Board, which would take weeks we don't have, I acknowledged. But there's someone who might help us circumvent that, Jerome's assistant. Jerome Wilcox? He's dead, and conveniently silenced. But his executive assistant, Penny, handled all his communications with the Federal Reserve. She knows the system, and she's not implicated in any charges. How does that help us? Because Penny quit 3 days before Jerome's suicide. She walked away from a 6-figure salary without explanation. After ending the call, I turned to Rodriguez. "I need more time before they transfer me. I can give you maybe 2 hours. After that, it's out of my hands. 2 hours to save a case that had consumed a year of my life and aimed to deliver justice for hundreds of victims. 2 hours before I disappeared into witness protection while the real masterminds walked free." Rodriguez arranged for me to be moved to a conference room under the pretense of a final case debriefing. There, with a borrowed laptop and his credentials, I began searching for Penny Adkins. She wasn't on social media, no recent address changes or vehicle registrations. She had effectively vanished. A woman with inside knowledge of a massive financial fraud disappearing just before her boss's suspicious death. Unless she hadn't disappeared at all, maybe she'd simply returned to her roots. I found her mother's obituary from 3 years earlier. Among the survivors listed was daughter Penelope, Patrick Adkins of Chicago, formerly Penelope Harrison of Millfield, a small town where she'd grown up, where people might still know her. I called the Millfield Public Library, claiming to be verifying information for a class reunion. The helpful librarian confirmed that Penny Harrison had indeed returned to town recently, purchasing her childhood home on Elm Street. With Rodriguez's help, I located the local police department and, using his authority, requested a welfare check. We have reason to believe she may possess evidence relevant to an ongoing federal investigation and might be in danger. 90 minutes later, the Millfield police chief called back. Ms. Harrison seems fine, but she was pretty spooked by our visit, said she's been expecting trouble. When we mentioned the FBI, she asked specifically if it was about Agent Hayes. My pulse quickened. Did she leave a message? Just this. He read off a string of numbers that made no sense to me. I thanked him and hung up, staring at the numbers I jotted down. Not a phone number, not coordinates, nothing that— Wait. I rearranged them into a date format, followed by what could be a time. September 17th, 2014, 15:42 and 7 seconds. September 17th, 2014, I murmured. Why would she send a specific date and time from 8 years ago? Rodriguez studied the numbers. That's well before your investigation began. Maybe a significant transaction date? I shook my head, then suddenly remembered something Penny had mentioned during my undercover work. She had been at Alpine for 12 years, longer than anyone except the executive team. She had once complained about the system migration they had done back in 2014 that had required manually re-entering thousands of accounts. It's not a transaction date, I realized. It's a system timestamp. She's telling us when to look in the regulatory backups. Rodriguez made a call to a colleague at the Financial Crimes Division who owed him a favor. 20 minutes later, we had the regulatory backup files from that specific date, showing the complete state of Alpine's accounts before and after the system migration. The timestamp Penny provided marked the exact moment when a new administrative adjustment protocol had been activated in the system, the foundation of the entire fraud scheme. The protocol that would eventually steal from hundreds of innocent people. And there, in the authorization log, was a name I didn't recognize. Lawrence Keller, identified as board chairman. Keller's not on our indictment list, I told Rodriguez. He's not even mentioned in our case files. Because he stepped down from Alpine's board 5 years ago, Rodriguez replied, already typing. Moved to a position at the Federal Banking Commission. The pieces suddenly locked into place. Keller had designed the fraudulent system, then positioned himself within the regulatory body that would oversee such crimes. He could protect the scheme from the inside, warning Alpine of investigations and helping them stay one step ahead of enforcement. That explained how the defense knew about my meeting with Dina, how they accessed our secure evidence servers, even how they knew where I lived. Keller had inside access to everything: investigation details, witness security arrangements, evidence storage. This goes beyond Alpine, Rodriguez said grimly. If Keller's involved, this could implicate half the banking commission. The protective detail arrived to transfer me, ending our investigation. As they escorted me out, Rodriguez promised, I'll take this to people we can trust. We're not finished. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in a safe house under a new identity, with no access to news or case updates. My handlers refused to discuss the trial or Rodriguez's whereabouts. I existed in an information vacuum, imagining the worst, our case collapsing, Mitch and his associates walking free, Keller continuing his operations from within the commission. Then one morning, my primary handler entered with a burner phone. 5 minutes, he said, handing it to me. Not a second longer. I answered immediately. Rodriguez? Not quite. The voice belonged to Vivian, but he sends his regards from the courthouse, where Mitch and 14 co-defendants just accepted plea deals. What? When? This morning. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced sentences. What changed? You did, she replied. Or rather, what you started. Those regulatory backups were just the beginning. Once we knew to look at Keller, we found the connection to 5 other financial institutions running similar schemes. Rodriguez took it to the FBI director personally, bypassing the normal channels Keller could monitor. My throat tightened. And Keller? Arrested yesterday, along with 3 other commission officials. They're facing federal corruption charges on top of the fraud counts. She paused. There's something else. The judge reviewed your suspension in light of the attempt on your life and Keller's involvement. You've been fully reinstated, with commendation. After ending the call, I sat motionless, processing the news. Justice was being served, but not through my direct action. I'd been sidelined for the critical final act, or so I thought. 3 days later, I was finally brought back to the Justice Department. Rodriguez met me in the conference room, sliding a thick folder across the table. Thought you might want to see this before the press conference. Inside was the complete case summary, all the plea agreements, cooperation statements, asset seizure reports, and victim restitution plans. But something was missing. Where's the evidence about Keller? The regulatory backups? Rodriguez smiled. That's the best part. We never had to use them. What? Then how did you get the pleas? With this. He handed me a flash drive. The day after you were evacuated to the safe house, every board member, senior executive, and major investor at Alpine Financial received this video file. He connected the drive to a laptop and pressed play. On screen appeared Penny Adkins, Jerome's former assistant, sitting in what looked like a small-town kitchen. My name is Penelope Harrison, formerly executive assistant to Jerome Wilcox at Westward Partners, she began. For 8 years, I witnessed and inadvertently facilitated a massive financial fraud orchestrated by Lawrence Keller and executed through Alpine Financial, Westward Partners, and 3 other institutions. What followed was a 40-minute confession and explanation, supported by documents she'd secretly copied over years. She detailed how she'd discovered the fraud, her growing moral crisis, and her decision to document everything instead of immediately reporting it, knowing Keller's influence would bury any investigation. Jerome discovered what I was doing 2 months ago, she continued. He promised to help expose everything, saying he wanted to make it right. The next day, he was summoned to a private meeting with Lawrence Keller. A week later, he told me to destroy all my records and forget everything I'd seen. When I refused, he threatened me with prosecution. That's when I quit and went into hiding. She looked directly into the camera. I'm recording this as insurance. If anything happens to me, as it did to Jerome, this video will automatically be sent to every board member, major investor, and media outlet on my distribution list. The video ended with her holding up a document, Keller's original system design specifications with his signature. She sent this to everyone except us, I realized. Rodriguez nodded. She didn't trust any official channels while Keller had influence. But once the video circulated among Alpine's board and investors, they panicked. 3 board members came forward independently, offering evidence in exchange for leniency. Mitch and his team, realizing they were being sacrificed to protect Keller, quickly followed suit. And Keller tried to flee the country but was arrested at a private airfield. When confronted with the evidence from multiple cooperating witnesses, he broke. Started naming other officials involved in exchange for consideration. The system Keller had built to protect himself had become his undoing. Once the first domino fell, everyone rushed to save themselves, creating a cascade of cooperation that exposed the entire network. 2 months later, I stood in the back of a crowded courtroom as Lawrence Keller received a 20-year sentence for fraud, corruption, and obstruction of justice. Mitch and his associates had already been sentenced to terms ranging from 5 to 15 years. But the true victory came after the sentencing, when the judge announced the creation of a restitution fund for all victims, more than 1,200 people who would finally recover what had been stolen from them. As the courtroom emptied, I approached the prosecution table where Vivian was packing her files. There's still one thing I don't understand, I said. How did Penny know to send me that timestamp? We never communicated during my undercover work. Vivian smiled. She didn't send it to Agent Hayes. She sent it to Anna Wilson, the quiet accountant who once helped her troubleshoot a system discrepancy involving that exact timestamp. The accountant who casually mentioned her grandparents losing everything to financial fraud. Penny made the connection after your identity was revealed in the news. Sometimes justice comes from unexpected allies, people who carry their own quiet burdens of complicity until they find the courage to act. Outside the courthouse, I called my father. It's done, I told him. All of it. Your grandparents would be proud, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Not just of the result, but of how you achieved it, by being exactly who they raised you to be. The system Keller had created wasn't just dismantled, it was exposed to its foundations, preventing similar schemes from taking root elsewhere. The Regulatory Commission underwent a complete restructuring with new oversight protocols. Alpine Financial was dissolved, its legitimate assets transferred to institutions with verified ethical practices. My revenge wasn't the destruction of individuals, but the transformation of a system that had enabled predators for decades. The greatest satisfaction came months later, when I personally delivered restitution checks to elderly victims like Mrs. Chen, watching their disbelief turn to tears of relief. Mitch, Keller, and their associates lost everything: their wealth, freedom, and reputations. But more importantly, they lost their power to harm others. They would spend years in prison cells, contemplating how thoroughly they'd been undone, not by dramatic confrontation, but by quiet, meticulous justice, the kind that would have made my grandparents proud. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share with others who appreciate stories of justice prevailing against powerful opponents. Drop a comment about your thoughts on corporate accountability. I read every single one. And stay tuned for more stories that explore the complex dance between justice, revenge, and redemption.